10,000 Americans are turning 65 every single day, 2/3 of whom have a chronic condition. 2/3 of that number have multiple chronic conditions. We are already short on beds at care communities in this country. We're short on nurses and doctors. We simply do not have enough people in this country to care for the people that already exist. And that delta of care is getting wider every single year. Anything that your company can do that would make the lives of older adults easier, that could reduce caregiver burden or burnout, or could help extend independence in any way, has this massive demographic tailwind behind it. And no one cares.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in.
All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, thrilled to have on Jimmy Zollo, the co-founder and CEO over at Joe & Bella. Jimmy, welcome to the podcast.
Pat, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you on. Give us an overview. What is Joe & Bella?
So Joe & Bella is an adaptive apparel brand. We make dressing faster, safer, and easier for older adults who are living with physical and cognitive changes. So what that means is we have a line of clothing that ranges from shirts to pants to socks to hoodies that are designed in a way using zippers or magnets or snaps that empower older adults to dress independently longer or have an easier time dressing with a caregiver.
I love it. So you have a fascinating background going into this. Give us a little context into your background and how you actually started Joe & Bella.
Yeah, it was not by design. I am not a apparel or fashion person by any means. I was early on at Grubhub out of Chicago as one of their first salespeople, and I was in charge of launching new markets and product lines, and did that for several years, stayed with Grubhub through their IPO. And after Grubhub's IPO, I launched my first business called Collaborata, which was a marketplace that brought organizations together to share the cost of research and data. And we were working with some great brands ranging from Disney to Ford to Reebok to the NBA, but our most important client ended up being AARP. And we were running an annual project with them called Hacking Longevity that looked at the future of aging and caregiving within the US amongst the 4 largest generational cohorts. And it became a passion project of mine, but really out of a place of deep frustration in that outside of AARP and outside of the big banks, no one cared. I thought we were doing this incredibly important work and really bringing life the fact that 10,000 Americans are turning 65 every single day, 2/3 of whom have a chronic condition. 2/3 of that number have multiple chronic conditions. We are already short on beds at care communities in this country. We're short on nurses and doctors. We simply do not have enough people in this country to care for the people that already exist. And that delta of care is getting wider every single year. And so we would go into meetings and say, hey, anything that your company can do that would make the lives of older adults easier, that could reduce caregiver burden or burnout, or could help extend independence in any way, has this massive demographic tailwind behind them. And no one cared. At the same time, I was helping to care for my grandmother. She was living in a memory care community just outside of Chicago. She was a wheelchair user. She was never diagnosed with dementia, but she was experiencing some pretty significant cognitive change at that point in her life. And during the pandemic, we got locked out of her care community like everyone. They went into a bubble. And the only way to communicate with her effectively was by FaceTiming a nurse, hoping the nurse would be able to pick up in their full PPE and would be able to run on into my grandmother's room. And one day she did, and my grandmother was getting dressed. So something I didn't ever expect to see, but this experience gave me a lens into her life that we otherwise wouldn't have known about. While my grandmother was getting dressed, she was crying. She was screaming in pain just from reaching her arm back into her sleeve, trying to get lifted up out of her wheelchair to have a nurse help her pull her pants up. It was a shocking experience. At start to finish, it took about 20 minutes. And I remember calling the nurse afterwards and saying, hey, does that happen often? And the nurse said, yeah, this happens every single time your grandmother gets dressed. And by the way, she's about average for what it's like in a memory care community. And I looked around to see if there are solutions out there. I found a couple brands that promised to make dressing a little less painful, a little faster, but they looked like hospital attire. So sent some options anyways to my grandmother, and When she got them, she opened the box, she looked at the clothes, and then she said, "These are too ugly. I'm not going to wear 'em." That ended up being the genesis of Joe and Bella.
We're going to dive into a lot of the things that you said there, but one of the first things I want to unpack is your level of knowledge when it comes to what I would broadly refer to like the market research side of helping this older demographic. You cited all sorts of stats even just a couple minutes ago that like clearly were so second nature to you. Where do these types of market research insights come from?
A range of places. So for us, I was fortunate that we were studying older adults for several years before launching Joe and Bella, and often in partnership with AARP and a number of their partners. And AARP is an amazing organization that has a robust consumer insights team that is putting out studies like on a weekly basis, both about demographics, but also on behavior and consumer sentiment. Relied a lot on that information, but we also surrounded ourselves with experts in the space, including a woman named Lori Bitter, who wrote the book, The Business of Aging, which is fantastic. And she was a huge source for us early on. But also then we went straight to the source. So we spent time in memory care communities and worked with not just the executive directors at communities like Benjamin Shermy, who is the executive director over at Kelch Communities, but to the actual caregivers within those communities to understand what is their day-to-day like. What is it like to get somebody dressed in the morning? Later on, our first hire was a former memory care nurse. For that very reason, we thought having even more expertise than what the research would provide would be meaningfully impactful to the business.
It sounds like what I'd broadly call like consumer knowledge has been such a major source of starting the business. Let's say brands that really want to start out doing a deep dive and better understanding their customer. Or to your point, if you can talk directly to your customers, if you can hire these experts, consult with these experts, that's phenomenal. I'm curious if there are certain sources that you would recommend other business owners go to be able to collect some of these other, call it like AARP-esque research reports, whether it's a formal market research report put out by like a Forrester or otherwise.
Yeah, I would say it depends on what you're looking for. I believe that having a blend of sources is important. So you're not relying on one individual institution or type of study. So meaning I think it's important to have quantitative data, quantitative survey data, purchasing data if you're looking in a specific market, but also blending that with reasonably scaled qualitative interviews in qualitative work that has been done. So for us, looking at not just ARP, but what's out there from NIH and NIA funded studies back from the government, looking at individual universities. So for us, Stanford has a longevity department that puts out just unbelievable work every single year. And then we paired a lot of that with the individual qualitative research that we did. So we would sit down with older adults and their caregivers. We would sit down with nurses. We would sit down with doctors. And the final component was collecting actual data. So looking at Google search trends, looking at purchase data, looking at Amazon purchase data within the specific categories that we were interested in.
Hey, listeners, if unpredictable revenue is keeping you up at night, this is for you. Most e-commerce brands don't have an advertising problem. They have a predictability problem. Pat from Intergrowth here. We help brands to build a profitable meta ad system for their business within 90 days. If you're interested in learning more, go to intergrowth.com/CGS to book a strategy session with our team. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. So given that a lot of listeners here are running businesses, maybe doing $500,000, $1 million, $2 million annual revenue, I'm curious where you would recommend that they prioritize this in all the other responsibilities of running the business. Is it top priority when you're pre-product? Is it still top priority, let's say, when you've already rolled out 3 different products and you're just trying to scale up sales? How do you look at that side of things?
It's always tough to say what the number one priority should be, but I think the research and having a complete understanding of who your audience is foundational to running the business. And yes, it should be upfront in making sure, hey, is this market big enough? Is what we're thinking about bringing to the market unique, or does it have an opportunity to win, whether that be because of price or innovation or quality or branding and positioning? If you don't know that going in, then you've probably already lost, or you're just sort of hoping to get lucky. And then moving forward, it needs to be constant because customers change, habits change. I mean, right now, this country is going through, the entire world is really going through this massive shift thanks to AI and what that means from a consumer purchasing perspective, what that means from a consumer sentiment perspective, how people are getting their information. All of that is changing in real time at a scale we haven't really seen since the dawn of the internet. So if you're not constantly talking to your customers, if you're not constantly researching your market, your competitors, your other product solutions that theoretically could be out there, you're going to fall behind.
So, on the note of consumer research, yeah, call it consumer research, marketing, better understanding your customers. One of the things you shared with me that really stood out is the aspirational marketing side of the business and everything you've learned about that. First, what is aspirational marketing? How have you found that concept to be effective?
Yeah. So with Collaborata, partnered with the ARP, in every study we ran, we had a measure that we called age aspiration, which pretty simply was we would ask people across the age spectrum, so 18 to up to 80, if you could be any age right now, what would it be? And that result we would call age aspiration. And the thinking behind it was we would tell marketers to use that to market to the ethos of that age as opposed to that actual number. So as an example, everyone who's 18, 19, and 20, they all say they want to be 21 years old. So you market to 18, 19, and 20-year-olds as if they're 21. The reverse, though, is pretty interesting as well. So you have 80-year-olds who they're not saying they want to be in their 20s. They're typically saying they want to be 64 or 65. But if you dig a little bit deeper, what they're saying is they want to be the age when they started becoming grandparents for the first time, is what ends up happening. So an effective way to market to that life state is all sorts of content about family or speaking to that, and that emotional appeal is that's what they most missed. That was their favorite life stage, which for anyone who's younger than that age right now should be pretty exciting. And so for us, we have a unique challenge in that our buyer is not the person that is typically wearing the clothes. So how that applies to Joe and Bella is this: our end user is not our buyer. Typically what we see is about 70% of the purchases that are made by the daughter or the wife of the person wearing the clothes. And it's typically the daughter. So age aspiration doesn't work directly to that person because we're not asking a 45-year-old woman, how do you see yourself in these adaptive clothes? Rather, we're asking, how do you want to see your dad? How do you want to see your husband? And so for us, it's about positioning our models, our content about this caregiving journey in the most positive, aspirational way we possibly can.
I love it. And that was so fascinating to me because I think I had mentioned this to you, but before you and I met for our first call, I was looking at the Joe and Bella site because I was thinking, I really need to get some new button downs. It'll be perfect. I can check you guys out. I'll, order one of your button downs. And I was looking through the site thinking, yeah, these look great. And then I saw the item about the magnetic buttons. And I was like, that's interesting. I wonder why they do that. And then we started talking. I said, oh, maybe these clothes aren't necessarily designed for me, but I love this jet. I would like to dive deeper into one of the items you shared there, which is mentioning, I think you said 70% of purchases are coming from the wife or daughter of the one who's going to be wearing the clothing. More often than not, it's the daughter. What really impresses me about that is I think the overwhelming majority of e-com founders would suspect a lot of data points like this, just kind of based on gut instinct, but wouldn't actually have those tangible data points to reference. So I'm curious how you go about systematically collecting these types of items. Is it someone completes a purchase and you send them an email with 20 survey questions? Other words, let's break that down.
It is so hard because people do not like responding to surveys, even when they're on the site. We try and capture the information directly from the customer when we can, but the majority of the customers will just never tell us, which is the reality. We try and capture it three ways. So we have onboarding, which would be, hey, someone signs up on the site for the first time. If they want to take a style quiz, a fit quiz, we'll ask them, hey, are you shopping for yourself or are you shopping for somebody else? And we'll take them through a path to try and present to them the best possible product for the need that they have. So we'll try and we get some of that data up front. And then post-purchase, after you purchase, right there on the site, whether you're on mobile or desktop, say, thank you for your order. Hey, by the way, are you shopping for yourself today? Or are you shopping for somebody else? We typically limit that post-purchase questionnaire to no more than 3 questions. What we found is anytime we go after that, the completion rate goes to less than 5%. And people just they've made the purchase, they're bouncing, they're done. For those folks who we can't capture any of that, we also will occasionally email them and try and get that information. So even with those three sort of direct ways of reaching to our customer base, we still have some blind spots. So then we analyze the audience a little bit. So we can go and see, hey, okay, we had these 1,000 purchases were made by women, but they're all purchasing for men's products, and their billing address and the shipping address don't line up. And so we can make some reasonable assumptions there based upon that sort of buyer to shipping demographic variance. So it is a bit piecemeal. The exact sort of percentage point might be off by 1 or 2, but it's directionally correct.
I love it that your caveat is, we might be off by 1 or 2 percentage points. Whereas I think most listeners or most other founders would be saying like, yeah, it generally feels like we're in this direction. Who knows, plus or minus 20% on this one. I'm curious, what tools are you using for the onboarding and then the post-purchase survey questions that you're setting up? Most e-commerce owners I talk to describe their revenue the same way. Great months, followed by terrifying ones with no real idea of what's coming next. So they sit on their cash instead of reinvesting it, and the business stalls out. The root cause is almost always coming down to only having 1 or 2 ways to acquire customers, none of them being extremely reliable. At Intergrowth, we help build diversified customer acquisition systems through SEO, meta ads, and content marketing, so that your revenue becomes something that you can actually plan around. Book a complimentary strategy session at intergrowth.com/CGS. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS.
So right now, onboarding, we are just using Klaviyo. We've in the past have also used Alia, and we have used another store sort of style quiz platform that we no longer use. The completion rate on the other one just was too low for our user base. So we ended up pulling it. And the other negative impact of the other one is it just slowed down our site a lot. And overall site performance was impacted by this other plugin. I think we're on Shopify, like I'm sure many of your listeners are, and the great advantage to Shopify is all these great pre-built tools. But the issue often is once you start using too many, they really can slow down the site. And even if you start deleting them, there's leftover code that is still in there that is slowing down the site. And we've had that issue. Post-purchase, again, it's primarily Klaviyo as well as some stuff that we actually custom coded ourselves.
So, I mean, it sounds like Klaviyo is able to get you guys like the overwhelming majority of this functionality. And then it's, as you said, you're not dealing with multiple plugins or multiple Shopify apps, I should say, that are all adding all that excess code to your site and drastically slowing things down.
That's right. We already have too many data sources as it is. One of my big goals for this year was trying to cut down the app usage by about 50% and trying to pull back on the number of unique data sources that we have and trying to have one source of truth because, as a marketer, there's nothing more frustrating than trying to look at GA for Shopify versus any other meta ads and seeing wildly different information about lead sources and conversion and performance, and trying to find that real source of truth is not easy.
Definitely. It's an ongoing struggle we see as well in most businesses that we work with is what is going to be the cardinal truth data source that we look at. And all of them have their imperfections or they're extremely expensive to roll out, but there's no perfect, really affordable solution out there. I think the last thing I'd really like to pick your brain on for today is marketing to this older demographic. So you mentioned a few minutes ago, 70% of purchases are, we'll say the overwhelming majority of purchases are coming from daughters of these older individuals. I'm curious how you balance marketing to, let's say, these daughters versus marketing to what I would assume is, the end customer that likely is far less active online than most other generations. What channels are you marketing in? Where are you seeing the most success? How do you think about marketing broadly for the business?
So, yeah, I could talk about this for a while because I don't think we've gotten it exactly right. And I think it's one of those things in marketing where you can always do better and you can always segment more and you can always customize the messaging more. And we're constantly pursuing improving there, but I'll say a few things. So number one is email is a big channel for us, and that allows us to segment that messaging a lot more. So for example, on Saturday and Sunday or maybe Saturday and Thursday, whatever it ends up being during the course of the week, we'll send out an email, which tends to be a little bit more promotional or product forward, saying, hey, here's the new color we have, or this is back in stock, or it's Memorial Day coming up. Here's our Memorial Day sale. So we reserve those for broader outreach to our community. However, on Tuesdays, we have a smaller email list for people that we believe to be caregivers, whether that be the daughters or the spouses or the sons of the individual who's wearing our clothes. And we send out an email every Tuesday at around 6:00 that is called Tuesday's Tips and Tricks for Caregivers. And it's often interviews with experts in the space, or our personal experience with caregiving, or Nurse Taylor on our team, her talking about a specific experience that she had, or even customers emailing in and sharing feedback or a story about their caregiving journey or advice about their caregiving journey. So we want to make sure that we are clear that we're in this with those customers, and we're providing and speaking directly to them, providing the type of information that would be valuable to them outside of just the clothing and the apparel that we provide. And we make sure that those emails look distinct from every other piece of content that we put on out there. So that'd be the first thing. From a channel perspective, we rely on a few different things. We are available on Google, SEO, GEO, and paid across different search platforms still matters to us, both because we're able to find folks that are proactively looking for our solutions. Often they are either describing the solution. So maybe they're typing in pants with zippers that could work with a cast, something along those lines, or they're describing their condition. So they're saying, my father has Parkinson's, what should I do now? And so those sort of broad brand agnostic searches, queries, agentic responses are key for us, and also then allow us to further segment. So if we know someone came on into us because they were searching for solutions for their dad with Parkinson's, that allows us to ensure that we are speaking to them about their specific needs. But then we also put out social content. We actually don't do much paid on social right now, but that might change later this year, but we'll see. And then we work with specific partners that can reach our audiences in different ways as well, whether that be AARP's Age Tech Collaborative, or a group called Spin Life, which is a large brand and retailer for wheelchair users, who they're actually opening up their first brick and mortar store just outside the Villages in Lady Lake, Florida. So if you are in that area, you can go to Spin Life store in Lady Lake and check out our apparel. I believe the store opens June 5th, so in a couple weeks. And soon there should be a bunch more stores across the country that you'll be able to check on out.
Wow. Jimmy, I love this. Let's say, first of all, listeners that want to follow you, learn more of your insights, where can they go to find you personally on?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Jimmy Zollo, or on X or Twitter, Jay Zollo. I don't post much there, though.
What about Joe and Bella? So one, how can we subscribe to this newsletter if we have elderly loved ones that we really want to take care of? Two, where can we go to buy Joe and Bella clothing for them?
You can do both at joeandbella.com to sign up for the newsletter, to check out our clothes. Our clothes are also available on Amazon in case you're a Prime user and want Prime same-day shipping. You can always get it that way as well. And then socials are Hello Joe and Bella across the board. So TikTok, Meta, X, Steven, I believe. You can find us on all of them.
I love it. Once again, listeners, this is Jimmy Zollo, the CEO and founder over at Joe and Bella. Jimmy, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Pat. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.